Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Housing and Communities Committee. It's pretty clear that with the clocks going back, they've actually switched the heating on in here, so it's quite warm for a change. I'd like to welcome you all to today's meeting, in particular to welcome Chief Superintendent Andrew Todd to his first meeting as Divisional Commander for Tayside Division. I'd also like to record my personal and this committee's recognition of the role and contribution of Chief Superintendent Paul Anderson, who has been promoted to the position of Temporary Assistant Chief Constable for local policing for the East of Scotland. I'm very pleased that in Chief Superintendent Todd we've got a local divisional commander who lives in our patch and who brings a strong commitment to local policing, most recently articulated at the meeting of the Scottish Police Authority Board, which we both attended last week. Item 1 on our agenda, can I ask if there are any substitutions and apologies? I've got a note of Councillor Anne Jarvis substituting for Councillor Harry Coates. Are there any other substitutions? No, that's it. Great. Thank you very much for that. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from elected members with regard to any items on the agenda? Councillor Ahern.
Yeah, I declare an interest, non-financial interest in item 5 as Chair of the Justice Partnership and also signatory of the report.
Thank you for that. Councillor McCall.
And I declare a similar non-financial interest in agenda item 5 as the Vice Chair of the Community Justice Partnership and a non-signatory to the report.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any others? No. Good. Item 3 is the minute of the meeting of this committee of 22nd of August. Can we approve the minute for me to sign? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, can we, as per our custom and practice, agree to vary the order of business to take the private items P1 and P2, being the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service operational update and the Police Scotland operational update for Perth and Kinross as the next two items of our agenda, and then resume in public session thereafter to take the police and fire public reports. Can we agree to do that? Okay. Could I ask that any members of the press and public leave the chamber, and we'll invite you back in when we move into public session. Right. Item 4.1 on our agenda is the quarterly Scottish Fire and Rescue Service report for Perth and Kinross. Members can see the strong performance in the reduction year to date of accidental dwelling fires of 11%, with no accidental dwelling fire fatal casualties, and a consistent reducing trend in the number of non-fatal casualties over the same quarter for the past 4 years, and on trend to becoming beneath the annual target. Accidental dwelling fire casualties are running at less than a third of the levels 3 and 4 years ago. Of the 26 accidental dwelling fires this quarter, 23 were considered low-level fires and 2 were limited to 1 bedroom. In 18 of the fires, smoke detectors were fitted and worked in 15 of those cases, giving early warning to occupants and also serving as a reminder for both installation of those devices and checking that they operate. Non-domestic dwelling fires also demonstrate a consistent downward trend for both the quarter and the year to date, with no fatal fire casualties this year or quarter, and the lowest number of non-domestic fires for this quarter for the past 5 years. Can I ask if Billy McClintock wants to speak to the report? Billy.
Thanks, Convener. You've probably covered my introduction now, so thank you for that. You've obviously got the report in front of you, and it does reflect quite a good performance over Q2. However, we have to bear in mind that that's only 1 quarter of a year, so we're now 6 months in, and most of the targets look pretty good. So if you look at on page 18 of the report, the performance summary, I've already talked about accidental dwelling fires, so a lot of the good work that we do across the partnership about home safety is really starting to come to fruition. So thankfully the number of dwelling fires we're getting over the longer term are starting to fall. And also the fact that a lot of properties now have fire alarm systems fitted to them, the actual damage that's caused by fire is vastly reduced as well. So generally what we're finding on a quarterly basis, if we have say 20 accidental dwelling fires, the damage to them is usually only 1 or 2 goes to more than a room. So that's really good news. And probably second to that is the fatalities is really low and remains low over a longer period. So that's really good work. And that's not just about the fire service. That's across the partnership and everybody supports us in the work we do, particularly around home safety. And also the non-fatal casualties are vastly reducing over the last 3 to 5 years as well, which is really good news. Non-domestic building fires, which are the fires that come under the Fire Scotland Act around fire safety, so your commercial premises. Thankfully within Perth and Kinross, those numbers over the long term in this quarter are staying relatively low, which is good news, as is the casualties and fatalities in those types of premises as well are really low and remain low over a period of time. Road traffic collisions, this quarter we've seen a fair bit of reduction in RTCs, which is good news. However, in the longer term, we know we have some work to do within Perth and Kinross and probably the wider Tayside area around road traffic collisions. Although this quarter the numbers have went down quite a bit, we still have a high number of casualties, so that is a focus for us within Perth and Kinross. As I'm sure we'll probably get into later, but there is a road safety partnership that's been established within Perth and Kinross with a view to that happening across Tayside and also having a pan-Tayside group. So we can actually really start to focus on what's happening on roads, what's the incidents, what's the cause, and what do we need to do to put something in place to prevent that or help reduce that. We now have a road safety partnership plan within Perth and Kinross. It's in draft just now. It's sitting with the partnership for consultation purposes, but I've got to say that it's probably not near the completed part yet, so we're working through that and hopefully we'll get that complete within the next 2 or 3 months, which then gives us an action plan to things to focus on the road traffic collision part of the job, which is where probably most of our incidents are coming this quarter as well. Unwanted fire alarm signals, generally that's probably 50–60% of all immobilisations across any quarter or any period of time. We do work hard. We have a national policy about reduction of unwanted fire alarm signals, and we continue to maintain that. However, most of these premises, we work on a trigger system, so if they have 3, 5, 7, 9 incidents, we then go in and there's things we can do. The majority of ones we attend only have 1, 2, so it's quite challenging to try and reduce that, but we do, every time we go to a fire alarm system, we do tend to try and manage that property and the property owners so that we can reduce them as best we can. That's probably much of the highlights. The only other thing I would like to bring to your attention is the appendices around some of the community safety work we do. I'll not go into them in detail because I could put absolutely loads of information in there, because I'm sure, as you know, as a partnership we're really quite active in the community safety aspects. But I've put some examples in there for you just to have a look at. And obviously Appendix 2 is notable incidents. I'll probably bring your attention to a couple of those. Over the quarter we had a couple of incidents which involved oxygen and acetylene cutting equipment, which can be quite difficult for us to deal with because it takes quite a long time, because there's a process to go through. If this type of equipment's involved in a fire, there's a procedure to go through. It can take 6 to 8 hours to resolve. So in the 2 incidents we had, one in Auchterarder and one in Dunkeld, we had the one in Auchterarder, we had to evacuate, I think, about 10 premises, and that was for around 6 to 8 hour period, and the one in Dunkeld involved around 23 premises, which they were evacuated for about 8 hours as well. Other than that, we've had quite a number of incidents in gorges, particularly House of Brewer area over the quarter, which obviously attracted quite a multi-agency response to that. Thankfully, they were all very successful incidents, but we are continuing to get quite a lot of those over the time. And really, that's all I want to say, unless you've got any questions about the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I've got Councillor Ahern and then Councillor Gray.
Thanks very much, Billy, for the report, and it's very good. The question I've got is regarding the road traffic collisions. The fact that we've got the numbers going down, but the casualties are going up, does that mean we're getting more serious accidents, which are resulting in more casualties?
I've actually had to look at the stats myself to try and understand it, but it's quite difficult to analyse why that is. I'm not really sure on my experience, because obviously when you're on call, you go to these incidents. I'm not saying that any of them are getting more serious. We've had a number of casualties over a less number of incidents, and I can't give you an actual trend to why that is. But just to say that between the partnership, we are starting to pull that information together to look at all the incidents and causation to that, and then what we need to do to help prevent them if we can.
I think the only thing that I would like to add to that, and I think it's because of the interest that members of this committee have expressed previously with regard to the development of the road safety plan, is that I am very keen is ready to come to the next meeting of this committee in January of next year. So it is something that's been worked on for a while. There is other activity going on outside of the plan, and Billy might want to speak about some of that, but I'm actually keen that the plan comes to our next meeting, so that we can scrutinise that. So, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Billy. That was a great report, and it's nice to see that all the fire services' hard work before fires is paying off, and the community is well aware of the safety measures they should be taking. Regarding the Auchterarder fire, I know the acetylene cylinders caused a lot of concern, and this, I think it's to these that you were referring when there was 10 hours before they could actually be sure they were safe. The other aspect was, and this was a seeing is believing issue, because I happened to visit a neighbour the day after, and they were very concerned regarding the asbestos roof, which was absolutely blown to smithereens. If you've ever seen smithereens, that was a great example, I can tell you, because there were particles from snowflake size to square foot size all over the place. And of course, there's everybody, as soon as they hear the word asbestos, is a bit puzzled to the safety aspect of asbestos. Could you give some clarity on the safety aspect of asbestos from a roof, typical roof material? Obviously, there's no complacency, and you've got to be sure before you release the public to the fact that it is safe or not safe. But the public seem to be caught with this fear of asbestos for quite a delayed period of time, and they were a bit uncertain for longer than seemed reasonable, I must suggest. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for putting me on the spot there. Asbestos incidents is a concern. It is obviously getting lesser as the years go on when we don't use those type of materials. However, when if I talk about the Auchterarder incident, having been trained in hazmat and that type of incident, it's one identifying it. So that garage that was involved was of such an age that the likelihood is the roof was asbestos. And thankfully, when we arrived, the roof had actually collapsed in, so the asbestos wasn't an issue for dealing with the fire, because we fought it in a defensive way. However, as you quite rightly say, that type of roofing, when it's involved in fire, it tends to break up and it goes quite a distance. So what we do is we set up a cordon at that point so people can't go in there. And at the end of the incident, obviously, we've got to think about the responders' safety, and our post-incident is the public safety. We obviously involve with our colleagues in the local authority in Perth and Kinross to help manage that at the end of the incident. Advice was given to us after the incident, and obviously we then hand over responsibility back to the owner. However, as you quite rightly said there, that involved probably 3 or 4 areas that were outside his property. But again, that responsibility goes back to him, and the council were involved giving that appropriate advice as well. When I just talk about asbestos for a minute, generally your issue with asbestos is when it's airborne and you breathe it into your lungs, because obviously it then has long-term health implications. So if it's damp and it's on the ground, it's generally not an issue. What you need to do is keep it damp and obviously get it dealt with in the most appropriate way, and that is by people that are expertise in removing it. And that's what probably would have happened in that instance. But again, that responsibility is handed back to the owner. Even though it's over his neighbour's gardens, etc., he has a responsibility to clean that up. We did the best we could and obviously gave advice at the end, and then the Perth and Kinross Council were involved in that advice at the end as well. So in that instance, yes, it was over 3 gardens, if memory serves, and that would have needed specialist cleaning up.
Tom will just ask the Director to give some supplementary information to that question.
Okay. There had been, sort of during the course of the incident, some discussion, sort of obviously, the council were involved in terms of, sort of where the evacuees were, sort of being housed and hosted. Originally we were going to keep them out, but in the advice in discussion with NHS Tayside as well, sort of that the advice was that it was safe to go back in, sort of, and the foot washing, sort of, and the footwear protection was agreed with NHS Tayside as well as, sort of ourselves and the Fire and Rescue Service.
Okay, I've got Councillor Drysdale. Are there any other questions after Councillor Drysdale? Not at the moment. Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Convener. Billy, thanks for your report, and I noted you commented about the unwanted fire alarm signals aspect in some detail. It's particularly alarming to realise that more than half of your blue light call-outs are for unwanted fire alarm calls. And you spoke about, in your report, about triggers at 3, 5, 7, 9, etc., call-outs to the same premises, allowing you to take further action. I mean, there's clearly an issue with reliability of fire alarm signals if you're getting that number of call-outs, probably, and tell me if I'm wrong, to do with the kind of lack of maintenance or lack of appropriate maintenance. I just wonder, firstly, whether your view is that the triggers that you currently have to adhere to are appropriate, or whether there is scope in increasing the or bringing further scrutiny to call-outs at an earlier stage in order to try and reduce the number of your call-outs, and also whether there is anything that can be done at a national level to try to make fire alarm systems more reliable and involve you in less unnecessary call-outs.
Thanks for your question. As far as the triggers go, yes, I think they're right. We've now reviewed our policy for the 3rd time, so that's all been reviewed and we're happy where the triggers sit. However, we're doing some work within Perth and Kinross about what's the top 5 types of premises we're dealing with and what's the issues there. And at that point we will start maybe, I know schools can be quite high usually, so we're now going to start engaging with education to see jointly from our expert advice and speaking to the education department what's the best way to go about trying to reduce these. However, perversely, I've also got to say we would rather premises had fire alarms than didn't, because it absolutely gives you early warning. However, the part we're dealing with now is the ones that are unwanted calls. And that can generally be around to the management of the premises generally, and some of the systems are getting a bit older, so we do tend to give advice on that type of thing, whether it's the management of the premises or on the actual system itself. But as I'm sure you're aware, these types of systems are quite expensive and to change, because a lot of the ones now are actually very intelligent, so they can actually monitor things to say whether it is actually a fire or it's a false alarm. But those don't come cheap, I wouldn't suggest. So we do tend to work with all premise owners to try and minimise that, and we'll continue to do that. But I'm not really sure how long that will take, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Okay. Councillor Braun, and is there anybody else who wants to comment on the report as opposed to questions? No. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Convener. Billy, thanks for the report. I just really wanted to comment. I noted that the station in Blairgowrie raised £5,000 for charity, and just really wanted to commend them for the work. And I'm sure the people of Blairgowrie are very appreciative of and the charity certainly, of that donation, and appreciative, of course, of the work they do anyway. So thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
Okay. Before we agree to note the report, Billy, you didn't highlight any of, I think, the excellent engagement work that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is undertaking locally, particularly the engagement work with young people. The report highlights the work that you've done with the RAF cadets and Perth High School pupils with the Anthony Nolan Trust. So I wouldn't want the meeting to pass without showing our appreciation of the work that you're doing to promote active citizenship. So thank you very much for that. Can we agree to note the report? Thank you. Item 4.2 is the Police Scotland local policing area performance results for Perth and Kinross. I'm grateful that Police Scotland have been able to provide ward level performance and crime data for the year to date. And I'm also grateful for the information provided on the summer recess drink drive campaign, which members expressed an interest in at our previous meeting. And I'm pleased to invite Chief Superintendent Todd to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like, if it's possible, to ask if we can take this in two parts. I'll briefly introduce myself and my own background, and then ask Ian to take you through the detail of the report, as is customary, as I understand it. So for Chair's indulgence, I'll just take 2 minutes to let you know my background. So thank you for the welcome as the new Divisional Commander. I have been in Tayside for 3 years. I'm a Perthshire boy, and I now live in Perthshire again, so I'm delighted to be back. My view around how we have our structure within local policing within Tayside will not change, in so much as I am very keen that we retain the local ownership that Ian has and that his 3 inspectors have within the area. That localism agenda that we've driven over the last 3 years in Tayside will remain under my watch and will be reinforced under my watch. I expect the inspectors and their sergeants and their community teams to be more empowered to deliver the local services to their community that is based upon the needs which we will see within the reports that we provide here today and at other times. I need to enhance their confidence and capability in order to take forward those decisions that they need to make and not continue to look up to the national. And I absolutely have the endorsement of the Force Executive that I am in command of my division. I don't need to go and ask national and ACCs and DCCs for their permission of how we police our area. So I would reach out to yourselves as the scrutiny board for the way and how we deliver our service, as well as how effective our service is, which in my view are 2 separate things. So I'm grateful for any feedback that you're able to provide to me and to Ian and others around the service and how we provide that service within our area. I could go on, I'm not going to, because I know that we have a deadline of time as well, but obviously I'm willing to and really content to accept any questions at this time, or indeed anybody that wants to speak to me privately at any other time before I hand over to Ian.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions? No? Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I hope you're not saving all your questions up to the end, but I suspect you may be. So going into the quarterly report before you, I'll briefly go through, as my usual want is, to highlight some areas of hopefully good work and maybe areas where we need to improve, go over some of the information and then ask any questions at the end. So starting with serious crime and I suppose domestic violence as well. So a range of issues there that have come with the norm. So there's been a slight increase in the domestic violence reports and numbers. We were probably down a little bit last year. We encourage, as you know, to both individuals and partner agencies to come to us with any concerns they have in relation to domestic violence, and those partnerships are well embedded and I believe give a lot of safety and protection to victims of domestic violence, and we will continue to focus on that day in, day out. To reassure the elected members, we will review outstanding domestic cases on a daily basis. That is how much of it the 4 of it is for ourselves. Speaking slightly wider in relation to serious crime, I've previously updated on some of the changes that happened probably about 18 months ago in relation to serious assaults. As anticipated, those numbers have now stabilised, and year on year we're probably bang on where we were last year. Not that that's and particularly to be complacent about, but it continues to be the focus, and detection rates remain high. Robbery, early in the year we saw a slight increase. That is again back on trend, and again detection cases remain high. Just because of the seriousness of those, we always look to response officers to deal with them in the first instance, but then often they're shared with either the Community Investigation Unit, CID, or wider within the organisation, and I'm appreciative to all the support that I receive on a daily and weekly basis in relation to those type of crimes. There has been an increase in Group 1 crimes overall. I'm trying to understand the reason for that, and there's a couple of incidents which I mentioned in the report, and one came just about a month or so ago, a couple of months ago. Came from PCAVs reporting what they believe to be human trafficking in the Perthshire area. So that was quite an extensive inquiry to find out what the circumstances were, and it transpired that a group of Romanian nationals were indeed being exploited, humanly trafficked for labour purposes. So a case like that, very quickly, we focus on their safety, vulnerability, identify the perpetrators, which were in this case also foreign nationals. We did speak with the Romanian consulate to make sure there's support back home and indeed locally. So these are extensive inquiries, but I suppose the point I'm trying to reach to, one instance of a report, which we welcome from partners, leads to 6 cases being reported. So that's the kind of scale that you can very quickly roll into. 2 or 3 other ones, we have had a few unusual crimes this year that have come to us, and some of them in relation to unnatural treatment and cruelty to children. So we've had officers going into a house for investigation and find that the house is very untidy, lack of food, lack of provision for the children of the family, dog feces within the house, and really an unhealthy place for a young person to grow up. So again, working with social work, housing and others, we obviously remove the children from that environment, put support into the family to hopefully help them, and again, depending on how many children are in that house, that can be numerous reports. So very quickly, the number of reports can increase, but it's the right thing to do to make sure that we're recording them correctly and report them to the Procurator Fiscal. Moving on to some of the other areas, I think I always like to mention hate crime. I do not think that we have significant hate crime issues in Perth and Kinross more than any other part of the country, but it does occur, and as I've explained previously, that's often in relation to inappropriate use of language, either in a previously commenced argument, or perhaps the use of alcohol. But when you see some of the tragedies that have happened again in the world over the weekend, with specific communities being targeted, I think we can't lose our focus. We sit with roughly 2 hate crimes or aggravations of hate crimes per week for Perth and Kinross. Our detection rate has consistently remained over 80%, and we focus again on them on a daily basis. We look for that protection of those individuals that are the victims of it, and also the education and potential enforcement of those that are perpetrating it. Again, we look for themes, whether that's as a victim set or a location, time, or an accused, and we take all opportunities to prevent those crimes wherever possible. Crime and antisocial behaviour in general, I'd like to say has improved. We obviously had a challenging time last year, as you'll be aware, in relation to thefts, antisocial behaviour and vandalism. A lot of work was done by ourselves, and again to mention the local authority and social work department in particular. I think we're seeing the fruits of that. Again, no complacency there, where the individuals and communities are still affected by antisocial behaviour, but I think we've seen quite a shift in that area over the last 6 to 9 months, so I'll welcome that. The report mentions a lot of the work we've been doing regarding protection, vulnerability and crime prevention. I think that where we've developed as an organisation over the last 2 years at the bequest of elected members is seeing dividends, and the report gives out a range of the activities that have taken place either with ourselves or with others, and I would encourage any elected member that sees a space where they think the police may fit into, then please contact either the locality sergeant, inspector, or indeed myself, and we will try our utmost to contribute to that prevention work that's ongoing across the length and breadth of Perth and Kinross. Road, I'm sure we're all affected by complaints or driving complaints or calls from the members of the public, and we spoke about the increase in fatalities, which is obviously tragic, each and every one. That there has been a change within the organisation in relation to the structure of road policing. So some of you may be aware that within Perth and Kinross, although we had a divisional road policing unit, the vast majority of the police officers that were working out of Perth primarily were involved in trunk road policing. As that was a standalone division within Police Scotland, there's been, again, through engagement, scrutiny, a reorganisation to basically disband the management structure around trunk road policing group and bring that back to what we would call a divisional road policing unit. So again, that gives perhaps me more influence on what happens locally, which I think would be welcomed across the floor. So we'll see what changes that will binge. Ray Cuthell will be David Hines moved on, and Ray Cuthell, who is a legacy Tayside officer with a breadth of experience, will hold the inspector's portfolio for road policing. So that is a wee bit of a structural change. Other things, perhaps, as we look back over the quarter and the amount of events that have been taking place across Perth and Kinross in the summer, it's extensive. It's a great place to visit, work, and live, as we all know. But it does bring challenges, and the scope of the events there can prove challenging. However, it's important that we do contribute to all those events and the prosperity of the area. I think we do that well. Looking forward, we're into Halloween, and hopefully people will enjoy that. And I'm encouraged by the local parade to try and give a bit of support and structure around that. Operation Moonbeam is our operation name in relation to the sort of next week fireworks, and we've done a lot of work on fireworks sales and the provision of structured displays over the last few years, and I think that's shown benefit for a safe environment where families, individuals can enjoy a firework display and without putting themselves or others at risk. Hopefully, obviously, a busy time for fire and rescue colleagues. Again, that coordinated response should pay dividends. We then move on to, from myself anyway, we start to look at the autumn vehicle safety initiative, when we encourage people to just re-examine their vehicles again. I can't be the only one that curses at the cars coming in the opposite direction with one headlight up and one headlight down, so we'll be having a bit of focus on that through the media, and again stopping and educating motorists, etc. That will then lead on to the drink driving campaign, and then obviously the Christmas festivities are just around the corner, and we will be looking to encourage, yes, happy events, but also people looking after themselves and their friends as we move into the year. As the convener has mentioned, we have provided the statistical data down to ward level at the end. I have mentioned previously that when we go to particularly low numbers, when we go down to ward level, any percentage changes can be very large. While I'm happy to answer any questions on the remainder of the report and indeed the figures, I would put that caveat on that some of them can seem particularly either great or alarming, and we're probably middle of the road for the majority of them.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chief Inspector. You touched on the changes to the structure of road policing, and the report shows a significant increase in over 200 speeding offences. I wondered whether that was a consequence of the restructuring, or whether it was as a result of any greater enforcement activity being undertaken locally.
So the change has just come into place this week, so it's perhaps a coincidence that there was a national campaign in relation to antisocial use of the road involving speeding, mobile phones, seat belts is perhaps a safety issue which resulted in that. Again, I obviously get feedback in from elected members and communities in relation to what are perceived as hotspots. I always encourage, while the community officers can do so much, our road policing colleagues to part that as part of their patrol matrix and focus on those areas. And I know that's been from Invergowrie to Aberfeldy and in the south area as well.
I've got Councillor Drysdale, then Councillor McEwen, and then Councillor Ahern. Just put your hand up if you want to ask any questions. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. I actually have 3 questions, which I don't know if you'll indulge me with asking 3 questions at the moment, if that's okay.
Sorry, I was writing down the names of the people who are asking questions. We'll go for 1 or 2. Depends how long they are, Eric.
I'll merge 2 questions into one if I can. The first main question, I guess, is at the last committee meeting, I raised a couple of issues. One around comparison of local figures with national figures, and I was given the answer then that there were hoped to be more national data to compare our performance with. Although a timescale wasn't given, I just wonder what the situation is with that. But in particular, the other point I raised at the last meeting was around detection rates and whether the local events that you mentioned regarding President Trump's visit to Scotland and all the local issues, whether that had a drain on police resources that affected the detection rates. And the answer I got then was that there was that the 6-month figures would give us a better picture on that. Well, I look at these 6-month figures on detection rates, and some of the detection rates are improved for sure, but domestic abuse down 10%, drug trade related crimes detection rate is down 20%, sexual crime down 25%, rape down 27%, housebreaking down 10%, and it seems to be picking up on the points that you made regarding the comparison between various localities. It seems to be worse in rural areas than in the city in terms of detection rate. So I just wonder, is it purely down to the additional drains on resources, or is there are there other issues at play, especially police resourcing?
Okay, there's a couple of different aspects to that. So I'll maybe start by the comparison, how we compare nationally. While no doubt you want to see the figures in black and white, as an LPA, we compare favourably with our neighbouring authorities in both Angus and Dundee in vast majority of areas, and Tayside D Division compares favourably with the vast majority of the averages across Police Scotland. So that's a positive to some degree. Also reflecting your concerns about some of the decreases in detection rates. So there's 2 aspects of that, and how it was affected by the number of visits and events over the summer. Undoubtedly, where a number of officers are deployed from the local area can affect the speed of inquiries that carry on, and indeed the prevention work. However, the ones you've highlighted that have seen perhaps the significant areas and the areas of concern probably relate to the more serious crimes, and while officers with those specialist portfolios are affected by an event such as a royal visit or indeed a presidential visit, they are not so affected as my officers in communities and response would be, and where we've perhaps maintained or improved those resources. So I think there's a slight potential that we're conflating the different issues there. there is reasons why some of the detection rates are falling. The serious historical crime reports that come to us. So when we look at sexual offending, for example, 30 to 40 of those percent of those offences are now non-recent. And therefore, we lose those forensic opportunities that are likely to be available to a more recent, something that's reported overnight or within the past couple of days. We encourage victims of all crimes, but particularly sexual offending, to come and report those matters when it's right from them, and indeed whether they want the support of partners to do that, partner agencies or indeed civil partners. And that's something that has been developed, over the last year or two, so perhaps on that journey it's becoming more and more prevalent that people, even this week, I think I've had 5 offences that are reported in the 70s. Now the opportunities to detect those are limited. Sometimes the offender's deceased, location unknown, and while we will do our best to investigate those matters, they prove really challenging. So there's a few different aspects there. Hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're really saying, and that the conflation of the 2 points was my attempt to conflate my 2 questions into one. Apologies for that, but so I mean, what you're really saying is that there is more reporting of crime, and some of it of a historic nature, and so it's more difficult to detect.
The opportunities are more restricted.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And my other question.
Eric, could I maybe bring other members in and come back to your other question at the end of that, just to give folk a chance. So, Councillor McEwen next. I will come back to you.
Obviously, when we get these papers released, all the councillors, we pore over these tables and the percentages, and we draw arrows up and arrows down and circle things and highlight things. On the road safety stuff that the convener mentioned, speeding, 902 sounds great. That's 5 offences a day over a 6-month period. The total road safety stuff goes down to 8 offences a day. That doesn't sound a lot from my anecdotal experience of driving on our roads. My question comes at the same time as reading these reports, I became aware that Police Scotland are about to introduce a digital transformation plan, a 10-year project to improve how the police function using IT, and they've got a mobile data project. So I was wondering, not necessarily to road safety, but you can use that as an example, but how will this transformation using IT in the police force help you do your job and actually help all these sort of figures change?
I suppose it's not just it's not just Police Scotland that's in a transformation into the digital age. It's society, and in 10 years' time, do you think we'll have the control over the speed of a vehicle? Probably not. It'll probably be driving us, telling us to prepare for the next meeting. So we are in a transition, and again the focus for the organisation, and I would even suggest that the committee is, where do we focus? Because there are limited resources, and you could put a police officer on every corner looking at speeding vehicles, and at this stage some people would still speed. They would go off road to do it. Our focus has to be around victims and vulnerabilities and serious crimes, and I'm not looking to diminish the work that's done on the road, and we spoke about the number of fatalities, and that obviously leads into that, so we can find that commonality of circumstance, we can deal with that. But there's challenges there, but there's also opportunities, and we've probably gone back 2 years when the average speed cameras were instigated into the A9, and there was a lot of discussion whether that was a pro or a con. I think we've all seen the benefits of it. I hear very infrequently now that people think it's going to increase the number of accidents. I think it's an easier road to drive up, and as society and technology moves forward, these are the type of advances that we will, with others, will probably be asking for, so that we can record and prevent and keep people safe. So there is opportunities there. The other things that digital information and technology may be given. a significant proportion of the operational vehicles used within Perth and Kinross and indeed D Division basically had, going back to my old background in road traffic, the spy in the cab, as the tachograph was called, it was introduced. Our vehicles now have the black boxes on, which we can look at speed, driving manners, and as insurance companies push for that, other work employees push for that, they should have significant changes. We spoke, although there's been a reduction in the number of accidents, we've had an increase in the number of fatalities. I'm hoping that's just a fluke, because vehicles are that much more safer than they were even a decade ago. And we look at some of the drive braking systems, parking systems, advanced warning systems that are coming. Our roads should become safer. I appreciate at the moment that there has been those fatalities, but it's a journey we're on, and we will grasp any opportunities that come our way.
Okay, thanks for that. It was my understanding that the technology sort of pilots were to assist officers with entering data, once rather than sort of 3 times, particularly for crimes that might straddle divisional borders, and also enable officers to do more kind of real-time data input, to get a quicker response. Is that sort of part of the
I think that's probably something we'd look to bring to closed session in the new year. We'd like to know exactly what's going to be available to us from the outset. So the work is ongoing. It will be in the new year. I'm sure we'd love to deliver something to the board at that time to show what the advantages could be. It should improve efficiency. That's definitely the hope. But the introduction of a new device on its own probably doesn't make that much difference. It's what we do with that extra time or that extra capability, or officers being able to input the information while out in the community, as opposed to in the office going back to type up. So we're on the way. If you can have a bit of forbearance into the new year when we see exactly what that's going to be, and we're probably even a year down the road to say what difference has it made. So probably into 2020 will give us an idea as to how impactful these devices have been, what additional capacity has it given my officers, and then what have we done with that additional capacity to improve detection rates and prevention across the area.
Thanks very much for that. Did you have a supplementary, Tom? Or? Okay. Councillor Ahern.
Thanks very much, Convener. My question's based on some comments that yourself and the Chief Superintendent said about road policing. I was at the Scottish Resilience Conference yesterday, and we had a briefing regarding the Beast of the East and the lessons that were learnt by Police Scotland from that, particularly for their officers. And now that you've said that we've now gone down to divisional levels, you have a divisional responsibility for the trunk roads and the police in there. One of the issues was the lack of personal equipment and supplies for the officers, especially on the M8 when that was blocked, which caused delays. Now, we've obviously been hearing in the media that we're going to have another bad winter, and I just wondered whether, now it's gone down to divisional, that the officers in the division covering the A9 and the trunk roads that are here, whether we've got sufficient supplies that are coming out, because they said there were delays for Police Scotland. I just wonder whether we're in a position, or your officers are in a position, to have a far more efficient service should we have any issues on the major trunk roads in our area.
Okay, thanks, Council. We're perhaps in a fortunate position within Tayside, and probably even more so within Perth and Kinross, that we are well aware of the weather-related incidents that can come. One might suggest in the Central Belt, and then as we look at half an inch of snow in London and the whole place grinds to a halt, we're a little bit more resilient as a community and as an organisation locally. So we have, I suppose you would say, tiered response to that. So officers working in Blairgowrie and Pitlochry get additional personal equipment to keep them warm and safe should they be in inclement weather. That also includes our road policing colleagues, whereas the majority of community and response officers, yes, will be equipped and can ask for additionality if they so need, and will be kept in a store that if we go into something that's particularly extreme, we can allocate that out. But because it is the time of year, you know, I've spoken to Councillor Shires about our first road closure on the 93 at the weekend, and just using that as an opportunity to work our snow plan through, so we ensure that it's managed appropriately. That opportunity was taken. At this time of year, we look at our spread of 4x4 vehicles across Perth and Kinross and indeed the division, to make sure that each station has access to suitable vehicles. However, my experience is that weather can be a hit or miss, and we can have good years and bad years, and we can't have a cupboard or a garage full for what ifs. So there may be times when the equipment isn't all that we would like, but that is unfortunately the nature of policing and weather forecasting. But what I can say is we do try to look forward and have suitable plans in place.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a couple of questions as well. Will I just do one just now, or?
If you can make them short and quick.
I'll make them short, okay. My first question was, well, the comments you just made about winter resilience. I know that's the next quarter, but Mrs. Renton and I were at a meeting on Friday where the issue of resilience for businesses was brought up, and the importance in places like, for example, Blairgowrie. We've got lots of people now travelling there to work. And then following on from our comments about the A93, it's about the messaging, you know, making sure that Police Scotland and the Council and various other agencies are giving out accurate, timely information about road closures and preparedness and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so as you say, we all have part of that, and for ourselves, I mentioned some of the autumnal and winter campaigns that are coming to the fore. They'll be widely broadcasted to try and make people think about it. You can only take the horse to water. Some people will put a spade and an extra jacket in the car, and maybe a bit of food, some water, and other people will just drive on willy-nilly. But we'll try that. In regard to lifetime, you know, again, one of the changes we're putting in place is making our media office 24/7, so that when the offices from whether it be in Aberfeldy or Creefsay, we've got a problem with really black ice in our area, we can feed that and get it out as soon as possible through whether it's radio or social media. So hopefully that will have an impact.
And my other question was about the licence trade heading out into the festive period, and also looking back over the summer. I know that in Perth and over in Eastern Perthshire there are pub watch, you know, community schemes. And I know that members of the pub watch scheme that I'm involved with appreciate the regular contact and advice from the police, and they're very proactive, you know, going into premises, helping give advice about identifying cocaine and various other substances that might be on the premises and how to manage that. But I'm conscious that there's an awful lot of premises that are not part of these schemes, so are maybe not receiving that advice, and that actually some of them are the ones that are perhaps a bit more problematic. And is there anything, I didn't see anything in the reports, is there anything that's proactively being done to address that?
So one of the, I would say, along with domestic violence, one of the biggest leaps forward under Police Scotland has been our response to licensed premises. This weekend past, I know there was 51 recorded visits to licensed premises in Perth and Kinross. The number of offending behaviour that's taken place within licensed premises is reducing. I do take on board that there's probably less licensed premises than there used to be, and there is perhaps that transition to preloading and people drinking in home, which is a challenge. But no, we are very proactive, and indeed you'll be, well, you may be aware there was a licensed premises search in Alyth last weekend on the back of some intelligence. And again, I would encourage any elected members who have intelligence, either from members of the public or themselves, to share that with us. We will act upon it. We're aware of the better run and well managed licensed premises, which are the vast majority in the area, and those that need additional support are in place.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor McEwen and I were only this morning talking about the benefit of switching to your winter tyres before we get deep snow, so maybe that message we can amplify as well. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My particular question is around the page 46, protecting vulnerable people. And I think, first of all, it's very commendable the amount of intervention work that's taking place in trying to prevent crime, which is always welcome and I think the best way to go. But my question is in relation to particular groups of people who are classified as vulnerable. At the last full council meeting, we had a report from the Perth and Kinross Adult Protection Committee, and that report highlighted two particular groups, particularly vulnerable from a variety of reasons, but perhaps financial crime is one of them. At the elderly, many of whom are in residential care, but also adults with learning disabilities. And so I'm just wondering if you have any specific strategies to protect those particular groups of people who have been identified as being at risk.
Yes, indeed, and I have mentioned previously, both here and my weekly bulletins and when the media come to visit me, in relation to perhaps what is seen as the green and prosperous lands of Perthshire for particularly internet-based criminals targeting our area, whether that's by luck or judgment on their part, I don't know. So it's continual message to feed into the public domain that when people phone up claiming to be from the Bank of Scotland, from the Hydro Board, from Sky, they will not ask personal information. And we share that on certainly a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, and I continue to do that and encourage others. While attempting to speak with the individual, have also done work in relation to some of the organisations involved. So we do have seminars with bankers, post office workers, social workers, care home owners, to say they also have a place for that, and we do see dividends on the back of it. We'll have had several calls in from other professionals saying something doesn't seem quite right here. We'll have, again, it's a bit generic, but we have an elderly person coming in asking for hundreds of pounds of iTunes vouchers. It doesn't seem quite right, or they're looking for a cheque for a roof that seems excessive. So that message is getting out there, but we still have vulnerable victims of crime because they are being targeted due to that vulnerability, and that is again a focus for us. Also, people with learning difficulties, while we look at protective measures in relation to that from partners, whether it be social work, from care homes or etc., we also look we have a scheme where we look at repeat victims, so that they can be relatively low level of antisocial behaviour. Perhaps it's just, I say just, and I don't want to mean it, this time of year we may just get an egg thrown against a window or something like that in somebody's house. And in itself, most resilient people will be annoyed, wash it down and move on. But if a person's been affected by antisocial behaviour, the fence being damaged, people knocking on the door and running away, we have a sort of 5-call trigger, and they would then get a visit from their community officer to understand perhaps why are they being targeted, do they have support from friends and family, from the state, or do we need to do more as an organisation? So hopefully that gives you some confidence that we are trying to protect the most vulnerable in society.
Thank you very much. I'm particularly interested in the 5-call trigger, so I might follow up with you on that separately. I have another question, if I may, but it's quick. It's on page 49 of the report, the table by ward of various crimes. I represent Perth City South, so of course that's the one of particular interest to me. I am intrigued as to how we could detect one robbery, or record one robbery, but detect 2. Sure. So that's very good work. But my more serious question around that is, I would be interested to know what the trends are in terms of the different types of crime within the ward areas. It's not something obviously that's here, but maybe something for the future.
Yeah, two aspects on that very quickly, and again, it's always the stats and the figures that show up these anomalies. So within the period we're under review, there's been 1 robbery committed, but as often with more serious investigations, there's a time lag. So there's been two reported to the Procurator Fiscal, 2 detected, so 1 from a previous quarter or potentially a previous year. That one goes. The issue about providing more information, whether that's against other sort of similar areas or national figures or indeed trends is to do that, I've got to take someone off the street and put them at a computer and say, go and provide that information. What I would broadly say is we, as a senior leadership team, meet on a monthly basis within division under the commander's auspices to look at performance and where it's going. And part of that is horizon scanning, whether it's new crime types or areas where we're seeing areas of vulnerability or indeed increased areas of criminality. So an example for that was earlier in the year, we noticed across the division, including Perth and Kinross, we'd seen an increase in robbery. Relatively, and again not to be dismissive of the crime type, relatively low level robberies, perhaps substance misuse on other substance misuse for low amounts of money, perhaps mobile phones, etc. So to counter that as a rising theme, we pulled together a small team, including 2 detective officers, an officer from Dundee, and between myself and my Angus colleague, a 4th officer, and they have increased the detection rate by something like 20-odd%, and by being the first officers to attend at the robbery, understand what has happened, because unfortunately we do get false allegations of robbery made for financial gain as well. So that focus does take place.
Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to deny members the opportunity for proper scrutiny of the police performance, but I'm conscious that we have got other items on our agenda and don't want us not to be able to apply proper scrutiny to that. So I've got follow-ups from Councillor Drysdale, McEwen and Councillor Braun, and then I would suggest that we then move on to the next item on the agenda. So if you'd keep your questions quick, Councillor Drysdale, I'd be grateful.
I will try. My question is regarding your paragraph on HM Prison Perth. I have an interest in that through the Integration Joint Board that I'm also a member of, and I'm very aware from a visit to the prison and from the recent report from the Inspector of Prisons, the issues, the drug and mental health issues in particular that exist in the prison. You say in this overview of your report that there, in the period under review, there were 57 incidents at the prison, and then you go on to add that 8 of these were for assault. So the other 49, are they mostly drug related?
So there can be a wide range of incidents that are reported to us from communications offences, perhaps in relation to domestic formats. So if people are writing letters out or making phone calls out of the prison, which are either abusing former domestic partners, or indeed threats against perhaps linked criminals, that can be an area. Drug dealing is an issue. Also the creation of weapons. We tend to find that our idle hands and all that to some degree give people the opportunity to make weapons, which can then lead to criminality as well. One of the biggest areas of recorded criminality within the prison service is devices which are not allowed in the prison, but you'll be allowed to have within normal society, mobile phones and internet-enabled devices being the majority of them. So that is a significant proportion.
Councillor McEwen.
Very quickly, earlier you mentioned trafficking. What sort of roles are traffickers exploiting their victims to perform in Perthshire?
Yeah, so I think I put some out last week. There's 3 main themes, which I hope I'm going to have to remember. The one that I've mentioned, which is perhaps, or the 2 that are more prevalent in this area, are related to agricultural work. So it's working in agriculture where teams are brought in, often from abroad, and they are not given either the minimum wage or good living conditions. Sexual exploitation, so human trafficking of women from around, normally women from around the world, would be another strong theme, and the third one has escaped me as I thought it might. But yeah, they tend to be the sort of the themes that we get here. Oh, the other one would be perhaps people with either mental health or or family connections being abused, possibly in relation to domestic work, so housekeepers, etc., being in poor conditions.
Thank you for that. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Convener. It's just going back to the drink driving side, 186 negative breath tests. I just wonder how we compared with other divisions.
Yeah,
and supplementary. Is there anything else that can be done? We all agree. I think it's 186 too high, but
absolutely. We rely on again. There's two themes there. One, it's proactivity. If we're out stopping vehicles, stopping individuals, whether it's for a seatbelt, mobile phone, or speeding, or the manner of driving, potentially a headlight being out, as I've mentioned, we as officers will obviously look for any signs of alcohol or drug abuse. So that's one theme, and we pick up on that on a daily basis. The other thing is the intelligence flow from communities. We know we've had that the road traffic legislation probably in place for 40 years now, and I like to think that it's socially unacceptable for people to drink and drive, or take drugs and drive. Obviously, the figures are counted to that to some degree, but we get a lot of calls or information passed to us either directly or through Crime Stoppers, and we will act to enforce on that when any opportunities come, but encourage for greater reporting.
So do we know how we compare with other divisions? Or?
Specifically, but you have to look at that when you look at head of population, or do you look at car owners? I don't know. Okay. I know numbers are provided, and I don't think we're an outlier, if that reassures you at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank members for their questions, and for Chief Inspector Scott for his responses. Can we agree to note the paper? Thank you. For our police and fire and rescue colleagues who need to leave, we'll let them go, and then the Vice Convener will take item 5.
Thank you, Convener. Item 5. This paper introduces the Perth and Kinross Community Justice Partnership Annual Report 2017-18. Community Justice Partnerships were established on 1st of April 2017 in each of the 32 local authority areas, replacing 8 community justice authorities. Each community justice partnership comprises 7 statutory partners and includes Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Local Authority, and the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service. Perth and Kinross Community Justice Partnership launched their first Community Justice Outcomes Improvement Plan on the 1st of April 2017. The purpose of the 3-year plan is to demonstrate how the partnership intends to achieve the nationally determined outcomes for community justice. Each partnership is required to prepare an annual report on progress towards achieving the national outcomes, and the first Perth and Kinross Community Justice Partnership Annual Report for 2017-18 is attached as Appendix 1. The 2017-18 Annual Report indicates that good progress has been made under all 7 national outcomes. In particular, good progress has been achieved in respect of women who offend through the continuing excellent work of the One-Stop Women's Learning Service, and employability through the One Side Project, which is a partnership between the Community Payback Unpaid Work Team and St Johnstone Community Trust. Overall, the first annual report illustrates the positive work being undertaken by both the statutory partners and third sector groups, and evidences the strength of these relationships by the collaborative approach being undertaken. The partners and third sector groups are committed in their shared aim to work in partnership to reduce reoffending, support those who have committed offences, and to ensure Perth and Kinross remains a safe place to live. Before we go to questions, could I ask Councillor Ahern if you wish to add anything as the chairman of that?
Thanks very much. I won't go into any of the details of that. I'll leave that to Charlie Cranmer, who's the Community Justice Coordinator. Just to say that this is the first year that we've had to produce an annual report, and it's based on a template from the Scottish Government, which when we were discussing or writing down the details of the outcomes, we're limited to 500 words, so we've had to be very careful about what we choose to put in the report. It's a good report. It shows the work that we've done as a partnership. And I'll pass it over to Charlie to go into the details.
Thank you. Before I go to questions, would Councillor McColl wish to add anything to that as Vice Chair? No? Okay. So any questions now for officers? Councillor McKeown.
I refer to page 70 of our papers and page 12 of the actual report, which is section 3 about reoffending. And I noticed the sections in it, sort of section 3.3 mentions universal credit, 3.4 mentions housing, 3.5 mental health, and 3.6 getting back into work, and relates us into people who get short sentences. And it seems from reading this that short sentences are a waste of time, because all they're doing is actually putting barriers and extra hurdles in people's way to lead a straight and narrow life rather than a life where they're committing crime. And I noticed further on in the paper it talks about the courts and the police issuing more warnings and the courts issuing more community orders. So the question is around short sentencing, and is short sentencing a waste of time and actually a hurdle and a problem in itself?
Could I ask Mr. Cranmer to answer?
Thank you for your question.
Councillor Leavenworth.
Thank you, convener. Could I ask a question? Sorry, I've lost the page now, so excuse me. Go to page 53 of our papers, and it's about the partnership with St Johnstone Community Trust. It talks about a pilot course which involves 6 clients. Could you give me a little bit more detail about the outcomes? Have they resorted to crime or?
Thank you. There's not a lot of outcome information as of yet because the on-site project's fairly new. In fact, the way it was run initially was to run it as a pilot project, to start to get some evidence, to see if it was going to be something that was effective or not. And the initial evidence certainly suggests that for those on the programme, it was particularly beneficial. We're still having a look at evidence subsequent to the programme just to see how effective it actually is, and obviously that's something that can take a little bit of additional time to gather. But based on the success of the pilot programme, then on-site is continuing to be repeated, and I think we're now we've just completed our second running of it, and the idea is to continue with subsequent blocks and to continue to develop the programme as it goes. I think evidence certainly suggested that while it was effective, there were perhaps little tweaks and additional things that could be done to enhance its effectiveness, and also to try and take on additional clients as well. Obviously, with it being a pilot, the number of clients that started the programme was restricted, but there's certainly an intention to expand that out to additional people in future iterations of it.
Great, that's a great news story, so thank you for that.
Any further questions? And can we agree to move the paper? Oh, sorry, comment. So was I.
apologies. My observation on the report is really that if we do enter into a partnership like this going forward, the Council should give serious consideration to ensuring that the coordinator post is fully funded for the duration of the partnership, because it's left some long-term planning, not compromised in any way at all, but certainly the continuity would be good to know that it's in place.
Can I say that I agree with you, Councillor McCall? Exactly. So I think the long-term and sustainable funding for the coordinator's role, to my mind, it is a vital role. It's something that I've flagged up, and certainly something that we'll be considering, and I would expect all groups would be considering in the budget process, because I think the position's been proved to be effective, and we would be looking, if at all possible, to continue that, but also looking to see what contributions can be sought and obtained from our partners in that approach. I know in the past the police have provided funding for that position, and where partners have had funding, that's been contributed, but it has been on a slightly ad hoc basis, and I think I'm very keen that we regularise that position. So,
do we have any further comments? So can we agree the paper? Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Item 6 is the Community Planning Partnership update for noting. The report includes an update for members on the work of the Perth City Local Action Partnership, which was presented to the Community Planning Partnership at their last meeting. The Perth City Action Partnership is the only LAP to be chaired by a member of the public, and the partnership reported on their plans to run a mini public series of structured discussions on identifying priorities for young people and then designing solutions to them. I hope that could serve as a model which other partnerships may be able to follow as a means of engaging with young people in order to address the priorities in their plans. The report also advises members that there have been 8 applications for the first tranche of the Community Investment Fund, with most LAPs setting up a grant panel and raising awareness of the second tranche of funding. The Fairness Commissioners returned at the end of August to be updated with progress on our Fairer Futures agenda. I was very pleased at their continued commitment to supporting the work of Perth Fairer Futures and the praise that we received for the work and the case studies that were presented at the meeting. We heard about the genuine empowering of tenants and their engagement in the rent restructuring programme. One of the commissioners highlighted this work as an example of best practice at the Scottish Government Scottish Housing 2040 Housing Policy Conference. And we also heard about the work of the Home Start Group to support breastfeeding in new mothers and with expectant mothers. The programme has been successful in turning around the decline in breastfeeding rates and supporting mothers to keep breastfeeding through the first few months of their child's life. The project has been so successful that funding has been provided to roll the programme out to Dundee and Angus, but there are now questions regarding the ongoing funding of the project locally. I've raised that with the Chair and the Chief Officer of the Health and Social Care Integration Board, firstly to ask that their board receive the presentation that we received at the Fairers Futures Group, but also to consider the question of ongoing funding for them. It seems to me that the impact of breastfeeding as the most effective intervention in a child's early development and nurturing are all well documented, and we need to see the Integrated Joint Board mainstreaming effective interventions when they've been tested and proven to work. I'm happy to open up for questions on the report. Are there any questions? Okay, can we agree to note the report? Thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is the Housing and Environment 6-month Performance Summary and Exception Report. Items falling within the remit of the Housing and Communities Committee are marked accordingly, and our scrutiny is therefore confined to those. The report highlights the success of the delivery of new affordable homes and council houses, which I'll return to later, the success in attracting warm homes funding of £1.2 million to Perth and Kinross through our strategic partnership with Scottish and Southern Energy, who contributed £139,000 of their energy company obligation funding, combined with our own investment in modern, efficient central heating systems, which will provide over £2 million to connect 352 households to the gas network, including 100 private homes. It will also reduce carbon consumption and take households out of poverty by providing 63 off-grid homes with air source heat pumps or LPG heating. I visited the Strathmore Street sheltered housing complex recently and saw the improvements which have been made there to provide residents with much improved social space, better lit and heated corridors, adding to the amenity of their building and encouraging residents to come out and join their neighbours. I also want to commend the Council on its rapid response to dealing with the trees which were felled within the grounds of Strathmore Street during Storm Alley. And I'll be visiting Carpenter Court this afternoon to attend the reopening of their communal lounge and see the improvements there too. I'm particularly pleased that the £25,000 allocated by this administration to empower frontline staff providing personalised homeless budgeting preventive approaches has helped 74 households to date and utilised £16,000 of that funding. I'm keen that we secure Scottish Government funding to further develop and enhance our Home First and rapid rehousing and homelessness support services. We're able to demonstrate remarkable improvement in performance with regard to tenant satisfaction, with our tenants putting us in top position in 4 out of 6 criteria and second and third in the others, with almost 95% of respondents to a survey of over 1,000 tenants expressing satisfaction with the overall level of services. 97% were satisfied. I'm doing a wee bit rounding up here. 97% were satisfied at how they were kept informed, almost 99% satisfied with opportunities to participate, and 95% satisfied with the quality of their home and management of their neighbourhoods. These are the best satisfaction results ever achieved by this council. I believe and hope that members will agree that these figures are no fluke, but are the results of strenuous efforts and commitment by our staff to respond to the needs of our tenants and to the spirit of the Housing Charter. On a related issue, having personally been very critical of the housing regulator's approach, it is good to see the regulator responding positively to the consultation responses regarding a stronger focus on outcomes, value for money, homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing moving forward. We have completed 25 new council houses in Scone, built to housing with varying needs standards, and ground floor properties adapted to allow for installation of special equipment such as hoists to meet the needs of people with physical disabilities. And also community engagement and preparations for development at the Glebe site in Scone are also progressing well with our strategic partners, CCG. Page 3 of the report refers to the delivery of new affordable homes in Blackthorn Place, Blairgowrie, a development that was not without controversy at the planning stages, but which is now providing a mix of affordable housing through Perth and Kinross Council and Hillcrest Housing Associations. The report includes a link to a video which has been made as part of our activities to mark Scottish Housing Day, which had a particular focus on young people during International Year of Young People. In the video, we interviewed 4 children and a parent as they moved into their new homes. I think it's a fantastic illustration of the impact that modern, spacious, warm and well-designed housing can have on families and children. I would crave your indulgence to show the video. So.
The stairs and our bedrooms and the 2 bathrooms.
2 bathrooms?
Yeah, because one's got a bathroom, one's got 2 toilets and 2 baths. One upstairs and one downstairs. And my family feels happy about it.
Do you really like it here then?
Yeah.
Is it better than your last house?
Yeah.
Do you think you're going to stay here for a long time?
What do you think in your house?
I've been mind blown with it.
What do you like about it most?
I like my bedroom, it's got cupboards in it.
Last that before?
No, last time I had one door, and now it's got 2. You just open it up and you get this huge bit. One at the bottom, one at the top.
What do you keep in it?
Not anything yet.
Yeah, you like it? So do you think it's better than your last house? What do you like about the house more? Most?
The kitchen. Because the last one was about that big, and this one's about the size of the living room, nearly. When I heard about it, I was like, this is another one of Dad's jokes. I saw it.
Yeah.
I was mind blown.
Get on the stairs.
So it's a lot better than your last place, you like it?
Yeah.
You think you'd be happy living in this area?
Yeah. Because last time I'd go in the same room as my sister, and all I see was butterflies all around the wallpaper. Red carpet. Now we've got black for a change.
Anything else you like about the house? What about the bathrooms, the living room? Are they better?
The living room is absolutely brilliant. And the other room beside that, you can't hear the music going. If the music's going through that house over there, beaming up, you can't hear it.
Right, okay. That's great, yes. We can play music really loud if you want.
Yeah, and then you won't hear it because they'll only hear their own.
What do you like about your new house?
Absolutely everything.
Yeah?
Because there's 2 bathrooms upstairs, and then there's one downstairs, so it's more easier for us to move. So say for my little sisters over there, they're basically, it's more easier for them, so I can go get a shower upstairs, and then it's a big hassle at my old house because I couldn't really get a shower as quickly as I would, but upstairs it's perfectly fine now.
Brilliant. So you've got a lot of brothers and sisters, haven't you? So you need a lot of bathrooms.
Yeah.
What else do you like about it?
The bedrooms, they are so nice, so nice. Seriously, they are.
Have you got your own bedroom?
Not yet, but it is in that one there. Yeah, but it's so nice. It's just used as a storage room just now, so yeah.
What about the kitchen?
It is fantastic. It's like really massive. It's hard to explain what it looks like, but like it's so massive compared to our old one.
And the garden? You get out the garden?
Yes, it is not as, I don't know how to explain this, but it's not as what I would think it would be, because last time it was a bit smaller than I thought it would be, but it's just a big difference, to be honest.
So you think you'd be happy here?
Yeah, definitely.
You like the area?
Yeah, I love the area. Plus, there's a football pitch down the road, 3 of them.
Great. Do you think this new house will make to your kids' lives?
It'll make a lot of difference. I mean, they've got a lot more freedom. They've got more room to move. Just got their own space, really.
Yeah.
So.
And it maybe wasn't like that in your last place so much.
No, it was a bit cramped in the last house. There was drafts coming in from the windows and things like that. It was pretty not adequate enough.
And it's a nice area to bring kids up in, I suppose, isn't it?
I never dreamed in my wildest dreams I'd end up in a place like this.
I hope you'll agree with me, judging by the smiles on your faces, that was absolutely brilliant and kind of completely encapsulates what we're all about as a local authority and why we want to deliver new homes for our community. Happy to open for questions on the report. Are there any questions? Councillor Ahern? Councillor Shires, yes. It was your arm.
A quick comment on that, and that was that it was not without its controversies, that development. and I still think that there's too many houses for the site. I'll just put that out there. But I would thank our officers who led the community through the process, because it really wasn't the easiest of processes, but it was cool heads from our officers which really did help the process no end. And I was speaking to someone from the housing office the other week who said it was actually really gave them a morale boost when they were able to allocate these houses according to the local lettings plans that have been put in place, etc. But that they had obviously seen this feedback before we did, so that was really good. My question was about the uptake of the shared equity housing that was also built on that site.
Claire, can you respond to that?
Yeah, there were 13 properties for shared equity, and Norma will probably confirm for me, but 11 have been sold and I think 2 are in progress. So yeah, the take-up of the shared equity has been fairly significant, and we've had really positive response to that.
And can I have a follow-up on that? And that is that this is the first time we as a council have done shared equity, is that correct?
We have other shared equities, but yeah, these are sort of really the first ones that we've done in this way. So it's been sort of quite a new thing for us. And certainly I think the positive response and reception in terms of demand for shared equity properties, and also I think having the blend of shared equity and social housing within the site, I think has been really positive in terms of communities.
Given that it's predominantly all private housing, right?
Yeah.
Right, it's been felt that that's been an appropriate mix. And
yeah, absolutely. And again, in terms of the shared equity, you'll recall that that was one of the big asks from the community and the community consultation and engagement. So in terms of the shared equity, we increased, didn't we, the number of shared equity units, and also we brought those forward first, and I think that had been a very positive move in terms of getting that, you know, community buy-in as well.
I think, as an example, it also serves to highlight the importance of delivering those sort of mixed communities at the planning stage. Now, I appreciate that there were reasons why there weren't. But I think, you know, we did actually, you know, manage to ensure that there were, you know, homes to meet the needs of people requiring affordable housing on site in the end, and I'm sort of very pleased about that. Councillor McEwen.
You know, the original Blackthorn Place plans came in the last administration, and I think, you know, the work and efforts of the previous committee and stuff is also part of it. It was a reasonable baptism of fire during being elected and being a brand new councillor to actually deal with the controversy that was Blackthorn Place. I've visited the site. I'm aware of people who will be moving to the properties there, and that video in itself is testament to the solid, great work that Claire and her team have done with the area. And, you know, all 3 councillors for the ward are on this committee, and, you know, we were all smiling and grateful for the positive success that it has been. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Convener. Just again, it's this whole programme with building affordable houses and houses for social rent has to be absolutely commended. Within Kinross, as a councillor, when you're dealing with cases where people are, you know, in dire need of housing, and you see them when they get their housing, as was seen in the video, they're ecstatic and it's life-changing. Regarding the report, we've got lots of projections about the need of housing. It would be nice to know, and with a breakdown of the areas, what we are actually delivering in affordable housing and social housing. I didn't see a table in the report that said exactly. You know, I know in Kinross it's about 50 plus houses that will be rolling out in the near future to do with social housing.
I think obviously the item 9 on our agenda today has the strategic housing investment programme and the developments which are to meet affordable housing needs for the next 5 years, which will give an indication of, you know, where those developments are. I don't know, Barbara or Claire, how we report on the sort of geographic spread of previously completed developments, whether that comes in the local housing strategy or whether it comes or whether it's information we can circulate to members.
I mean, certainly that information, it's detailed within the SHIP. It's also detailed within the local housing strategy. One thing that we've recently produced, and I don't think it's been circulated yet, is an elected member briefing that gives detail of the new build programme within each locality, the current stage that we're at, with more detail than we've got within the SHIP. It's like current progress on on-site builds. So that, I think, is due to go. I'm looking at June. Is it already gone out?
Send it to you.
Right, that has just recently been circulated. We also have got other information in terms of waiting list information that is available. It's actually available on the website, but I can point everybody in the direction. So if you want to know what the overall demand on the housing waiting list is for each of your areas and the general turnover, that information is available. So we can point you in the direction in terms of where that is on the waiting list, because that's quite useful information for you as elected members to have when you're receiving these kinds of inquiries.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Illingworth and then Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much. I'm taking a look at the biannual tenant satisfaction survey. I know that for this survey there was a change in methodology in the way the questions was asked. Can you tell me if other Scottish local authorities are using exactly the same methodology for assessing customer satisfaction?
Certainly, I can, and I'll let Claire expand on this and give you a more detailed response. But in the past, we'd obtained tenant feedback from events and through paper survey work, and we'd found that response rates tended to be fairly low. And we were also aware that telephone satisfaction surveys were being conducted by other local authorities with a much higher response rate, more detailed feedback, and to be perfectly frank, more positive feedback as well. So it was certainly a route that we wanted to go down to improve the quality of and quantity of the responses that we got. But I'll let Claire tell you more about that.
Yeah, I think you've actually covered the answer there. I think in the first instance, the questions that we ask of tenants are those that are prescribed by the Scottish Housing Regulator. So in terms of the actual questions that we ask, all social tenants of local authorities and also registered social landlords are asked those questions, and we're required to submit that information to the Housing Regulator. And as Councillor Barrett's indicated there are a range of different methods of obtaining tenant satisfaction and tenant feedback. What we have done traditionally in the past is a postal survey to all 7,500 tenants. We've received very limited response. It's been a tick box sort of almost satisfied or dissatisfied with the service. And generally we've tended to find that those have been tenants that probably have been less satisfied. So the approach that we adopted this time was similar to what a number of other local authorities have recently been doing, is to have a more in-depth face-to-face survey. We wanted to have a large sample, so we've had over 1,000 tenants, which has been really good. And not only the information that you've got there in terms of, you know, the percentage of satisfaction, we've got a lot of rich information that sits behind that. We've got the information broken down on a locality level, and also some different, we drilled down, say, in some areas round and about repairs satisfaction, because that's one area that touches all of our tenants. So we've got some more information about tenants' views on a repair service. We had quite an in-depth look at digital inclusion and technology. You'll know that we've got our online repairs reporting, and we wanted to know why tenants weren't really taking that up. And that's mainly because a lot of them aren't as digitally agile as the wider population. So it gave us a lot more rich information as well.
Councillor McEwen, did you have a question?
Thank you for that.
I've got two short questions. There are two things that actually, Convener, you mentioned during your introduction to the paper. One was the Worms Homes Fund, and a bit more detail regarding what actual replacement central heating that the rural communities have managed to use, not just like for like, but using more of the green energy type options. And the second question I had was about the pre-tenancy and the welcome packs, and whether they come in different languages and different support for people that actually have problems with literacy, etc.
Okay. I think the pre-tenancy packs are literally hot off the presses. Claire, do you want to respond to the questions about the energy efficiency measure. Obviously, the report says it's air source heat pumps and LPG for the forthcoming phase of the warm homes, but I don't know whether we've installed other measures through our previous awards through that sort of funding.
Hello, yes. As convener mentioned earlier, North Muirton is now being added onto the gas grid. And in addition to that, it is air source heat pumps and mainly solar panels. But I can get some more detailed information and have that sent out to you. Okay.
Do you have a supplementary or you?
The other thing you mentioned was the welcome packs and whether they're adaptable for other languages and literacy issues.
Yeah, as Councillor Barrett says, the welcome packs are literally hot off the press. We've just recently concluded them. As with all of the information that we give out to tenants, if there's a particular need and it's required in the language, then that is arranged at the point of let. So that information we will provide in whatever language is required. And we have to do that again with our tenancy agreements. So the information we've got, and we will circulate this information. I think we're going to do a formal launch over the next few weeks. We'll circulate the information that's held within the tenants packs and the pre-tenancy information as well, because I think that will be useful again as elected members to have that.
I think Councillor McEwen raises a valid point, and I think particularly with the greater focus on special needs or meeting special needs housing, it may be something that we want to look at, whether we can prepare either pre-tenancy or welcome packs in a kind of easy read format for and I don't know whether that's where you were coming, Councillor McCall. If it was, then I'll pass over to you, and if not, I'll let you ask your question. So.
Thank you, convener. I was going to comment on that at the end, but you beat me to it. There's agreement breaking out all over here. My question is really, there's more points of clarification on page 115 of our report around the performance indicator exceptions. And it's really just seeking clarity. First of all, I think the statistics are very good, so that's commendable to the work of the housing team in achieving these very positive outcomes, I think. But I just wanted to clarify whether the average days in temporary accommodation really is measured at the point of an applicant being awarded a home or actually moving in. I think at a previous meeting I indicated that there were sometimes delays between allocation and actually being able to take up residence because of supplementary either decoration or repairs required to the home. So I'd quite like some clarification about that particular timeline. And related to that, a similar type of question on the average days to complete medical adaptations. Is that from the date of the application or from the date the application was approved, is the average days we calculate?
Claire, can you respond to those?
Okay, in answer to your first question with regards to the average days in temporary accommodation, that is at the point that the tenant has moved in. And this is purely relates to temporary accommodation, so it's not in relation to our mainstream housing tenancies. So this is where we place somebody into temporary accommodation to respond to their immediate homelessness whilst they're awaiting a permanent offer of housing. But that's the length of duration. What I would also say in terms of that figure, you'll see probably from the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan report, we've significantly reduced the volume or the numbers, our portfolio of temporary accommodation. So this figure of 74.4 days is actually almost artificially inflated because these tend to be households that are perhaps staying in Greyfriars or in our hostel accommodation that need to remain within the accommodation for a longer period until they're ready to move on. So we very often have people in temporary accommodation for just literally, a week, a couple of weeks. In response to your second question, in terms of medical adaptations, it is from the date of application. Oh, sorry, June.
Sorry, it is the date that the application is approved and the referral is passed over to Repairs and Improvements team to then take forward. So it's the date of approval.
It's just a supplementary on that then. I think at a previous meeting there was a separate report that indicated that time taken from the application to approval was perhaps outside of target. It would be quite useful to see those two things together.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Can we agree to note the report? Thank you. And this takes us to item 8, the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan. Perth and Cross Council are in the process of preparing our Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, and this report seeks to bring members up to date with that in advance of the draft plan being submitted to the Scottish Government prior to the deadline of the 31st of December. Members should note that the draft plan will be circulated to committee members at the time of submission, and it will be included in the agenda for this committee to approve at our meeting in January 2019. And there's also a members' briefing session, I think on December the 17th on the plan, but details of that will be confirmed in due course. As has been highlighted to members previously, we are well ahead of the curve when it comes to rapid rehousing for people made homeless due to the implementation of our Home First transformation programme. The success in designing and implementing the Home First model has been recognised by the Scottish Government and the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group at numerous events earlier this year and in the report. Having enjoyed all that well-deserved limelight, we continue to focus on the next stages of improving outcomes for people made homeless or threatened by homelessness through early intervention, personalised supports, prevention through engagement with families and landlords, both private and local social landlords. Things like our joint allocations policy, the integrated homelessness and allocations team, our common housing register, and the active support that we get from housing associations such as Caledonia Housing Association and Hillcrest Housing Association are key to the success of rapid rehousing locally, as well as our buybacks, new build programme, vacancy chain management, and bringing empty properties back into use that members will be familiar with. Section 2.5 of the report concentrates on the sorts of things that we want the draft Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan to consider. We have the opportunity to be innovative, to try new ideas that either the Scottish Government or HARSAG are keen to test and explore. We want to look at the cost of moving into housing, our lettable standards, a shift to ready to occupy rather than ready to let, and the scale of what's involved in setting up new homes for previously homeless tenants. We also want to look at whether we can improve tenancy sustainment by improving the lettable standard for homeless clients, what wraparound support model of intensive supports can ensure that tenancies are sustained into the future and that vulnerable people are protected in their new homes from people out to exploit them through abuse of their home as a party flat, theft of their property, or for drug dealing purposes. We want to see if there's more that we can do to achieve with personalised budgets and the rapid response to prevent homelessness at or before crisis point is reached, and taking a person-centred and not a property-based approach. I am concerned that the funding available for councils is being top sliced. The 19 million referred to in the paragraph 1.6 is now reduced to 15 million, 4 million having been top sliced to be awarded to 5 Scottish cities, excluding Perth and Inverness, to be channelled through so-called pathfinder cities or authorities in partnership with Social Bite and a housing association. The irony of cities lagging well behind ourselves on rapid rehousing being designated pathfinders and being awarded funding to deliver temporary accommodation solutions is not lost on me, but the understanding is, and I will be pushing the Scottish Government to support the sorts of innovation and sector leadership that we can deliver at every opportunity as we prepare our rapid rehousing transition plan. Are there any questions on the paper? No. Can we agree to the recommendations of the report? Thank you. And the Vice Convener will take item 9.
Thank you, Convener. this paper deals with the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. This paper requests committee approval of the revised PKC Strategic Housing Investment Plan covering the period 2019-20 to 2024-25. This plan lays out how Scottish Government funding will be used to support the delivery of the local housing strategy, which was itself approved by the Housing and Health Committee in May 2016. It has identified several key priorities, such as more affordable and well-managed homes, varied in type, size and location, and homes that are warm and energy efficient and therefore affordable to heat. As we know, the demand for housing in Perth and Kinross continues in line with the rising population, including an ageing population. The local housing strategy has a target of 150 social housing completions per year, and is pleasing to report that during the period 2017-18, 161 additional social rented homes were completed between the council and registered social landlords. That excludes any buybacks. We are required to submit an annual report to the Scottish Government, the last being in November 2017. This latest report is attached to the paper and sets out how PKC will use funding to invest in council build and also direct investment in housing projects of housing associations and partner agencies. Since factors beyond the control of PKC can affect the plan, there is a need for constant review, and in certain cases new projects may need to be used to replace those that failed to progress. The level of funding for the next 2 years is 16.2 million for 2019-20 and 17.3 million for 2020-21, with an estimate of a further 17.3 million for 2021-22. The paper includes details of proposed projects plus substitute projects in the event that one fails to progress in the anticipated timescale. The aim is for 1,433 affordable houses to be started on site for the council and its partners until April 2025, not including the 183 houses which are or will start on site by April 2019. Buybacks are included. As stated in the strategy, the council aims to build 400 new houses for the 5-year period to March 2021. Although work has been slower in early years, the appointment of a strategic development partner during 2018-19 will speed up the programme. PKC will also continue to buy back former council homes, and grants from the Scottish Government will assist with the purchase of at least 24 properties per year. Providing high quality yet affordable homes to demand is and must remain one of the top priorities of this council. Can I ask if there are any questions? Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, it's just a question in the sort of long-term strategy. I mean, a lot of people, as they get older, I know there's a certain reluctance of people to leave the family home, but I mean, what support would an older person get to downsize? Because obviously that would release homes for families.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good question. And we do have a number of our existing tenants that are sitting in what were previously their family homes. So perhaps they'd had, you know, their family within the properties, and then maybe you've maybe got 1 or 2 members of a household sitting in a 2 or a 3 bedroom property. So through our allocations route, we give additional priority to households in those circumstances that are looking to downsize into a smaller property. That would obviously meet their housing need, give them a smaller, more manageable property, and then equally free up a larger family-sized property for applicants or existing tenants on our waiting list that are potentially in overcrowded situations. So that does work quite well. We actually have the fewest number of recorded tenant households on our waiting list that are in an overcrowded situation than we've had before. But we cannot force anybody to move. They hold the secure tenancy there, and if we don't have a property that's either in an area or of a type that's desirable to them, then obviously that is their tenancy and it's entirely up to them, and they will continue to remain in the properties. So yeah, we're continually offering sort of incentives for people to move where we can.
My question was broadly about support. I mean, if an older person had no family support, I mean, would we give them support to help them with the actual move should they choose to do it?
Absolutely, we have a team of housing support officers who would help with exactly that. So if there aren't any family members available, then we would give support, and our housing support team and our housing officers based out in the locality would. If there are any more I suppose sort of more complex support needs, then obviously we would call in colleagues from the Health and Social Care Partnership to support with those.
further questions? Councillor Ingleworth.
Thank you. It's just a comment, really. I think this is another good news story from the housing department here, along with the rapid rehousing. Just like to commend the department for that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just regarding the constraints and risks and mitigation actions on the affordable housing as part of a larger development, reducing the ability to bring forward the site. If you have a large site where we've maybe forward loaded the social housing on the large development, if another site somewhere else is as well recorded in the report is not delivering on the amount of social housing or affordable housing that we need, is there potential to go to one of these large developers and look to potentially get extra social housing put on to make up the difference within a given area on the big sites?
Claire, is that one for you or Norma?
No.
I just really want to know what the potential is of doing that, and what the issues would be with doing that type of action.
Yes, there certainly is. I mean, as we've outlined in the report, it's very much a moving feast, and it really does depend on how things progress, what timing of the projects all coming forward. If things are getting delayed in some areas, then yeah, we do look at alternative projects, and they're prioritised in the same fashion as the ones already in the programme for inclusion in that programme. So it is very much a moving feast as we move forward to be trying to make the best of what's coming forward at any time. And we certainly have bought, as you describe, off the shelf from developers some affordable housing.
There's a number of things that we've deployed in the past. We have operated a scheme of providing affordable housing credits. So in the circumstances that you describe, where the developer was prepared to increase the number of affordable homes on site, as beyond the affordable housing policy requirement of 25%, if they provided 33%, then they would gain affordable housing credits for that number of houses, which they could then offset on another site in the same housing market area. Tended to be a form of assistance that was kind of useful when the private housing market had ground to a halt, to be perfectly honest, and is kind of less attractive if developers know that there's a strong private market for their developments. But it's something that we've used to increase the delivery of more affordable housing in the past, and we've also looked at opportunities where, for example, if we didn't have an RSL or a developer for the affordable housing element on site at the time, for whatever reason, if they were fully committed elsewhere, then the developer building a smaller number of houses for the council has been another option that we've utilised to make sure that there was some affordable housing on site. So.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Again, my questions really are more points of clarification. On page 151, the table, or Appendix 2, regarding the estimated required level of new build housing, the totals at the bottom, is that meant to be the same as the total in the final column? Because they don't equate currently. They don't add up.
Norma, could you help us on that one?
I would have to say yes. That would seem that would be the case.
Okay,
we could
so
check that. Certainly,
there's not something missing. It's just there's a rounding error, perhaps.
It could be rounding error, okay. Yes. Because but yeah, we'll check that out.
Okay, thank you. And my only other points of clarification, really. I mean, I agree with others that this is a good news report, and it's excellent news for Perth and Ross as a whole. It's really just around these reports here where there's multicoloured lines on them. Perhaps maybe just put some narrative, because I don't really understand what they all represent. So maybe if they could be explained to me, that would be helpful.
Norma,
the coloured lines, perhaps ironically, are really there just to try to make it slightly easier to read. The different colours refer to the different years that the projects are predicted to start, and it in some ways make it slightly easier to try to work out which year the different projects are starting in. It's actually a template that we fill in from the Scottish Government, and so that's why it's slightly awkward to work with. But the narrative, perhaps we could look at putting further narrative in. The narrative pages are the pages that go ahead, and then we complete these templates for them. But if there was something in particular, certainly I could clarify for you.
Not really. It's more a presentation point that sometimes in presentations like this there'd be a little kind of footnote or legend that would say this is what the different colours represent, because these are public documents, and so therefore, while we all might be familiar with some of them, they're available to members of the public, and it would just help, I think, make them a little clearer and help people understand better actually the very good work that's going on. Thank you.
We can certainly look at that, yeah.
Do we have any further questions or any comments? Can we agree to move the paper? Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for your attendance and your participation. That brings this meeting to a close. Thank you.